I'm going to be talking mostly about AVA, and I'll talk a little bit about testing React with AVA. So yeah, that's what this is all about. It's not everything, but it's most things. Yeah, the examples will be contrived. These are slides for a workshop. We're not actually doing a workshop. You don't have to like do this as we go if you don't want to. I will just do it and you can watch, and I think that will be the most effective mechanism for today's discussion. So AVA is super cool. Sorry, I've got a cough. So it is it's really, really fast. And it's the reason for that is it takes your files and it spawns separate processes to run your tests. So if you have 10 test files, it's going to spawn 10 processes and run them in parallel. And so the length of time to run your tests will be the length of time it takes for the longest file to run, with some overhead from AVA doing the spawning of these processes. So that's not as exciting or anything for maybe a small project, but for a big project like what we're doing, that's really exciting and it's crazy fast. The test syntax is awesome. It enforces writing atomic tests, which is kind of like at first, if you're used to describe blocks and before each and after each and all of this stuff, this can be really frustrating at first, but you get used to it really quickly and then you start to love it. Having a test that has all of its dependencies and everything that it needs right from the start is really nice. There are no implicit globals, so there's no describe or it or any of that stuff, which is actually kind of nice too. You just import what you're going to use. Let's see. Yeah, isolated environment for each test file, which is also really cool because then you don't have to worry about doing teardown for tests. Like if you muck with process env or something for a certain file and all of its tests, then you don't need to reset that or anything because it's running in a totally separate process anyway. Yeah, you can write your tests in ES 2015. You don't even have to configure anything for that. It just kind of works out of the box. It's really, really nice support for asynchronous patterns like promises generators and async functions and observables. It's just, they're really, really like clean as far as the way the test looks and stuff. It's really cool. Enhanced asserts is one of my favorite parts, and I'll demonstrate that a little bit later, but it's really common that in like a Mocha test or Jasmine, you'd say like, or I guess this would be Chai, but you would expect something to equal something, but the message that you get from that isn't very useful, and so often you'll add a message to your assertion so that it's like helpful when there's an error or something. With the enhanced asserts from AVA's assertion library, it actually uses something called power assert. It is really like the errors are super friendly, and so you never have to write a message because the errors are just kind of magical. Tap output is cool because you can use the tap nyan cat thing, which is kind of fun. And stack traces are beautiful. So debugging AVA tests is really nice. So actually, I should probably mention some of the shortcomings of AVA. It doesn't run in a browser, so you can mock a browser with JS DOM, but that's your only answer for a browser right now. It's definitely on the roadmap for the AVA project, but they're not going to be doing browser like support for like they have other things they want to focus on first. And so if you wanted to run this with Karma or something, that's not really possible right now. But for most use cases, JS DOM works really well, and that's what we're using on P2P right now. So it works great. So for testing React, on the React side of things, there are 3 inputs to a React component. First, the props. And so this applies to all React components except props. And so that's really easy to test. You just say, I'm going to call this or like render this React component with these props and assert stuff on the output. That's really easy to test. The user is like when there's a click event or something, and so we can use React's test utils to simulate events and stuff. So that's pretty easy. And then data, and that's a little bit more tricky, but like that's if you were to pass in we don't really deal with this so much with Redux. Redux kind of abstracts this a lot for us, but if you had like an older store, or if you're kind of doing a naive implementation of something, like you'd say on component did mount, you'd instrument something for subscribing to a service or a store, or like making an async request. And so that would be like a data thing. So whenever like you subscribe to this store and then something changes, and so mocking out those changes to do that testing. So the workshop that I have demonstrates these three, like how you can really easily utilize these three methods. So this, if you want to, you can follow along, but like I said, I'm probably going to move too fast. So yeah, but feel free. So that's all my slides. Let's go ahead and look at code. Feel free to interrupt me at any time. This is a very low-key workshop sort of thing. So if you have a question, interrupt me. In fact, I'm going to stop right now and ask if anybody has questions. Anybody have questions? I'm seeing no unmutes, so we'll just keep on moving. Great. So I already have the project. And I've already gotten it all set up. So, yeah, so here we have, I actually probably have everything already installed and stuff, which is just fine. So if you install or clone the repo, you'll check out the start branch, and that in that you'll have this app folder, which has 3 folders. Like I said, this is very contrived. These don't even depend on each other or anything. But it doesn't actually build an app or anything. But you'll see these test files, and there are comments in here to say like, okay, these are the tests we're going to be creating. Oh, and these should not be to-dos. These should be skips. So, whoops. Let me fix that actually. Dang it, I'm going to have to fix everywhere. My bad. Let me just do a quick find replace, because they just recently made it throw an error if you have to do. So we'll say test.skip. Replace all. Run a search find. Now we replace all. Great. It's like you didn't see anything. Great. So here, you can just go into the instructions and you'll see really friendly instructions. We'll actually pull them up in the GitHub repo, so it's rendered nicely. But we have this Terry the Tiger. So if you wanted to follow along later, Terry the Tiger will tell you when you actually need to do something. We're pretty much just going to go through what Terry the Tiger tells us to do, and then I'll kind of explain what what each thing that we're doing is. So first thing we want to do is we're going to install AVA. And at the time of right now, this recording, AVA is at 0.14.0, and it has some sweet features. So while that is installing, we're going to be adding a script to our npm scripts to do the test for AVA. So here we'll just add that. And let me explain a couple of the things about the what we're doing in this script. Actually, first, before I continue, does anybody have questions about what npm scripts are? Or I can explain how to use npm scripts if anybody's unfamiliar. Okay, great. I'm going to assume you're all super knowledgeable about that then. So here we have a test script, and we're using the AVA binary that we just installed, and we're telling AVA that we want to use anything that's in the app directory that ends in .test.js, and we're going to specify verbose. I generally don't use verbose. What this basically does is the output is like there's more output. The reason I generally don't do that is because it is just like after your test build up, there's a lot of output. But I'm going to do that now so that it makes it easier for us to make sure we know what's going on. Yeah, and so that's that. So we can go ahead and right now run npm run test, or we can run npm test, or we can run npm t. Those three are equivalent, and we'll see that it runs our script, and we have 10 skipped tests. So 3 in toggle, 3 in store, and 4 in customer list. So great, so far so good. Now we're going to add a watch because watch is really nice. So we'll add a watch test. And for this one, we're going to leverage something in AVA called the watch mode. So if you're not familiar with what watch does, this is really common for test runners because of test-driven development, or TDD. It's really nice to be able to be developing your tests or like developing your feature and then watching the test to make sure that like you don't break anything as you're going. And so AVA's watch mode is special in that it is intelligent and it knows which of your tests to run. And so, yeah, it's crazy awesome. Most watch modes will just say, okay, you changed a file here, so I'm going to rerun all the tests to make sure you didn't break any. AVA is smart enough to know, okay, you changed this file, but only these 3 tests actually depend on that file in any way, and so I'm only going to rerun those 3 tests. So it's very, very cool. So we're one thing that we could do is just copy this and paste it in and add watch. But npm has this sweet feature that allows us to say npm t for test and then add the dash dash, and then anything that comes after is watched or like is passed to this script. So we'll see kind of what that does here in a sec when we run npm run watch test. And something busted. I forgot to save the file. There we go. Let's do that again. Great. So if we look at the script that is actually run, and the npm, like when I run npm run watch test, npm will say, okay, I'll run npm t dash dash watch, and then npm's like, oh, you're running me again, so I'll run this. So that's basically what's happening. It's ultimately this is what's getting executed, and now you can see that we didn't actually exit. The process is still running, and so if I go into this file and I just add a line or something, then I'm going to see my tests are rerun. And it's super cool because only 3 tests are rerun, and that's because I only affected the toggle test file. I didn't affect anything else. And so the if I go and add this line, let's see. Oh yeah, this is going to be busted because we haven't set up everything yet. So you'll see in a minute how even if I change a line in the toggle file when I import it, it will actually rerun these tests as well. So it's watching both my test files and my source files. Cool. Any questions about that? Feel free to ask. Yeah. Oh, you mean like, so like being able to hook up AVA into your regular like node start kind of thing? Yeah. I don't know if that, if it's possible to have AVA run as like part of another process. Like if there's an actual, I'm only familiar with the CLI that they expose. I don't know if they actually expose a a node API to start things, but you could totally just use like an exec module and kick off a sub process that starts AVA's watch mode. That would totally be possible. I'm not sure what value you'd get out of that other than having all of your processes running in like a single terminal, which you could do various ways. But yeah, does that answer your question? Okay, sweet. So yeah, we'll just go ahead and let me review really quick the things to make sure that I'm not missing anything. Yeah, okay, so we can stop this process. So now we actually have the tests running, and we could go ahead and write the tests right now, but I actually like setting up all of the infrastructural things before I and like build processes and all that stuff before I actually get into implementation stuff, because it can often be a little difficult to get into tacking that stuff on afterward. And so the next thing that we're going to cover is code coverage. And so no pun intended, but it was perfect. So we're going to install a tool. So first I should say code coverage with ES6 is a little bit tricky because if we go to the Babel REPL here, and I say actually that was fine. So here I have a single line that does not a whole lot of stuff, but then I have all of this stuff that goes that outputs here. And it has a function that has a ternary operator. I have nothing about a ternary operator in my code, but because the outputted code has that, if I instrument this stuff for coverage, then I'm going to have to make sure I cover both of these cases to get good coverage, and that's not very fun. So a quick intro to code coverage. I actually recorded a 3-minute podcast. I'll paste a link to this in our chat. But basically this explains how code coverage works as far as I understand it. And so a brief idea here is it's going to create a variable called, I can't edit that. Well, it'll create a variable called coverage, something I think it's like _ and then whatever. And then it will insert something like coverage at line 2 or whatever equals that plus, or it basically increments it every time. So it checks first, is it undefined? If it is, then it's going to be 1 or something like that, and then it increment it every time you hit that line. And so this is what instrumenting your code for coverage means. And if we instrument this code for coverage, then we're not actually checking the coverage of our source code, we're checking the coverage of the transpiled code. And so that is a problem. So we need to have a tool that enables us to instrument our ES6 code rather than the transpiled code. So the most popular tool for instrumenting code for coverage is called Istanbul. However, Istanbul doesn't work with ES6, and so a tool was created called Isparta, which uses Istanbul and can instrument code for ES6 code with coverage. However, Isparta, if you look at Isparta, you'll see that actually right here, it has this no maintenance intended, which is really sad because a lot of projects use Isparta. And so there is yet another tool that we can use and that we're going to use called NYC. And NYC still uses Istanbul under the covers, just like Isparta. However, it supports ES6 and it supports something else I didn't really talk about, but it supports things that spawn sub-processes. So the value here being, because AVA runs our tests in multiple processes, Istanbul can't really cover that very well. And so NYC has the power to be able to do that. One other thing of note is there's a Babel plugin called Coverage. And so if you were to run something in the browser, this is the tool that I would recommend. It's really cool. It's just a Babel plugin that instruments your code for coverage the exact same way. And so it works with Karma and it works great. So don't use Isparta, use this plugin. Okay, so that is tangential and hopefully informative. So we're going to install that. npm id nyc. So that is the same as npm install / save -dev nyc. So we use shortcuts here. And we're going to instrument our code for coverage using this tool. So let me just verify I'm looking at stuff correctly. We have this cover script that we're going to add, and it's super cool. I'm going to wait till this finishes. Almost done. Okay, great. So we'll add cover, and all that we're doing is we're just prefixing npm run test with nyc, and nyc will say, okay, any subprocess created by the script that I'm going to run, I'm going to instrument code for coverage for that. So now if we run npm run cover, or if you install a sweet package called npm quick run, then you will be most pleased. Basically, it gives you this alias called nr, and it will allow you to kind of alias these, it gives you a binary called nr, and it'll allow you to alias your npm scripts. And so I can say, instead of npm run cover, I can say nr cover, or because I don't have any other scripts with that start with C, I could actually say nrc. And oh snap, I didn't save my file. There we go again. And it will run my cover script, which is super cool. So I use this module all the time. npm quick run, I will paste that in here. Okay, so let's just take a look here. We have no test running, and nothing has been covered. And the reason for that is we're not actually importing anything that we'd want to instrument for coverage. We're not going to instrument our test files for coverage. And so let's just quickly, just to make sure that things are working, we'll say foo.js, and this will say module.exports hi. And then I'll go into the toggle test, and I'll say import foo. And if I run nrc again, then I should see foo in my table output. Boom, right there. And we get 100% code coverage on that. So sweet, everything is totally working. We're going to go ahead and delete this guy now and delete this line. Great. So yeah, so we have things set up for coverage. However, let me just remove a couple of these folders so that we see what NYC is actually doing on our file system. So if I run nrc or nr space c again, then we see that it creates this NYC output folder, which it's going to stick some stuff in, like you want to get ignore that. But one other thing that it is not creating, and we want it to, is the coverage folder, so that we can use the lcov report and the HTML report to see some fancy stuff. So if we go in here, I'm going to copy this configuration for NYC. We can actually add some CLI flags like reporter to do this, but that is just really noisy. And so I'm going to stick these down here. And yeah, so we want all these different reporters. And so now if I run the coverage command again, then we're going to now get this coverage folder. And if I open coverage lcov report /index HTML, then we're going to get this fancy report. And we'll look at this again as soon as we start actually covering things. This is really handy to have when working with coverage locally. Great. Any questions about code coverage before we continue? That's right. And it has some defaults that like file globs that it excludes. Sorry, what? Yeah. So what you said is accurate. So anything like any subprocesses that are created from this and any files that are being tested, it's any JavaScript files, it's going to instrument those JavaScript files for code coverage and then report that for us. And it uses Istanbul to do that. But it also has, because we don't want to instrument our test files for coverage, because that's not, that would skew our numbers to instrument test files. And so NYC comes prepackaged with like a couple globs of file patterns to exclude. And soon, very soon, AVA will actually include a glob for the support of star.test.js, that convention. And so eventually your test, if you follow this convention, your test can just look like that, which is super cool. And so I made that pull request because I like star.test. So yeah, that's basically the idea though, is that NYC is going to do that. Did I answer your question properly?
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. Great. Any other questions? Okay, great. Then let us continue on. Let me think, just make sure that I am echo. Okay. So we got the cover, we got those things. Oh yeah, one other thing that's really handy to have. Oh, and I should also note that right now, NYC is saying, hey, you've got 100% test coverage. That's awesome. But we actually don't, because this is 100% of nothing. And so one thing that I didn't cover, and I will just reference, is I recently submitted a pull request on P2P Node Web API that added a bunch of this stuff. One of the things that it added is something that we have in the P2P Node Web repo. That is this cover all the things thing that basically has a single test in here to ensure that we're covering some files, and it will go get all of the source files that we want to test eventually, and it will go and dynamically require those right here. And we just catch an error because we don't care if it errors out. We just want to require it. And so that way NYC will instrument it for coverage, and we'll be able to get a more holistic view of our test coverage in the project. So that's something to look at if you want to make sure that if you want to track your progress toward getting 100% code coverage on the entire project, or like your progress on code coverage in the project, because that like is important. Because if you didn't do that and we just started like implementing coverage on Toggle, then once we got 100% code coverage on Toggle, it's going to tell us we have 100% code coverage, which is not entirely true because we also have these other source files that are important. So that's what that is all about. Any questions about that? Okie doke. Sweet. So yeah, so now we're going to move on to this check coverage script, which is also quite handy. This we'll just put right there. What this does, and this actually comes from Istanbul. I'm pretty sure NYC just passes this on to Istanbul. But basically, you can define a threshold for the code coverage in your project. And so you can say, I want, like we have these different vectors of code coverage, and then like we can get the average of these. Is what like if you go to an open source project that reports their code coverage, what you're seeing is the average of these. But you have statements, and that's like, let me see if I can see an example. A statement would be like, this is a statement. And then you have branches, and that would be if you have like an if statement somewhere. So you say like if foo, whatever. So that would be one branch. And functions, obviously it'd just be if I had a function foo. This is a function as far as coverage vernacular goes. And then lines, let's see. I'm pretty sure that like each one of these is just a line. This is something that maybe if you really care about, you can go research for sure. So we'll go ahead and run npm run check coverage, or nr check would work. And we get this error that says no coverage files found, and that's because we haven't actually covered anything. So we'll just leave this as it is, and we'll run it a little bit later when we actually start testing stuff. So yeah, let me think if there was anything else I wanted to say about it. Oh yeah, so 100% code coverage is really exciting and pretty easy to do in an open source library or something like that, in a smaller module. In a full-on application, it's not really, like it's totally possible, but it's, you get diminishing returns really quickly after around like 60 to 80%. code coverage. So yeah, just take that into consideration. And all this is really telling you is that this line of code was run in a test. It doesn't tell you anything about how this line of code responds given different kinds of state. So if you can cover all the lines of code by passing this function a string, but it will totally blow up if you pass it a Boolean. And so it's not really telling you 100% about your robustness of your application or anything. It's just telling you that lines were run, and that's still valuable information, but often people confuse what is valuable about it. So any questions about that? Okay, sweet. So we're going to go ahead and skip this nodemon thing. Basically, nodemon, it sort of gives you the same behavior as npm's or the AVA's watch mode, except it's not intelligent, so it just reruns everything. The reason that it's useful is because NYC doesn't have a watch mode, and if we run NYC with npm run test or watch test, we're not going to get any output of coverage until the process exits, and so we don't actually get coverage. And so if we wanted to, if we're working on improving coverage and stuff, it's nice to have the test rerun as we make changes so that it updates the coverage numbers and we can go look at what those look like. And so this nodemon step is just to add that kind of behavior for our coverage stuff. But because of time, I'm not going to get into that. Great. So now we're going to finally get into testing. So I only have about 15 minutes-ish, I think. Is that correct, Tyler?
You have as long as you want.
Are people bored? Are we liking this workshop so far, or this tutorial thing so far, or should I skip ahead to anything? Okay. Cool. Okay, then I'll just keep on chugging along. So here, if we look at the actual code, we've got this customers file, and this is a really, really naive store. And so it's not exactly Flux at all. It's just this pub sub kind of concept, and it just holds an array of customers. You can subscribe to when the customers are changed. And yeah, and I think I didn't even I implemented unsubscribe, so that's cool. So this is totally just JavaScript, no React in here at all. And so that's why we're going to start here, because it is less to think about. So we also have a test file for it. Let me move this guy over. And here we have a couple skipped tests. So let me just go ahead and uncomment import store from customers, and we're going to start in our watch, our test watch script. We're going to get an uncaught exception here, and the error message is block scope declarations not yet supported for outside of strict mode. So what it's complaining about is this line right here. Let is not supported right now because this file isn't in strict mode. However, in actual ES6, it's implied strict mode, and so this should be working. The problem is that we're not actually even though we have our entire application or our entire project set up to transpile with ES6, and AVA is transpiling our test files with ES6, AVA is not transpiling all of our test files dependencies with ES6. I know that's really probably kind of confusing why they wouldn't do that, and it's frustrating sometimes to me, but it does make sense. So what we need to do is tell AVA that we want to transpile these things on the fly. And the way that you do that traditionally with Babel is you can use the Babel register thing. And so that's exactly what we're going to do. So we're going to npm install as a dev dependency Babel register. And we want to tell AVA, before you run any of my test files, I want you to require this file first. And so we're going to have, now we have Babel register as a dependency here. So we're going to set up a file in a new directory called test. We'll call this helpers, and set up test environment test.js. And in here, we're going to do all the stuff that we want for our test environment stuff. And so I'm just going to copy that from right here and stick that here. So we have Babel register being required here, and that will say, okay, I'm going to hijack the require statement, and anything that is required from here on out is going to be transpiled by Babel. So now we need to configure AVA to require this file for all of our test files. And so we'll do that in our package.json here. We'll just do AVA. Oops. And now I got to remember, we'll just copy this. We're going to say, hey, AVA, I want you to require that thing. It's actually in helpers. Setup, test, env. There we go. Yeah, and so I could do this on the command line. This is also configurable if I just said require, and then I can do it right there. But I like to keep my scripts small if I can help it. So we'll just do it here. And now if I rerun this in our W for the watch test, it's going to pass. So like I can now import the store, and it is going to transpile all of these ES6 magical things, and it will still work, and everything is transpiling fine. Any questions about all that stuff that I just did? Okay, great. Hopefully it all makes sense then. So now we can actually start writing tests, I think. Oh, and we can also, if we do nr cover, then we can see our coverage numbers here. Sweet. So now we are reporting coverage, and actually let's go ahead and look at the coverage report. Things are not looking good for our application's coverage. Customers is not being covered very well. So this 1x means that this line was run one time. This function declaration, the creation of the function, was run one time. However, this line inside that function was not run. And so that's why our functions percentage is getting 0. We don't have any branches in this file, and so we get 100% on our branches. But because each one of these functions has statements in them, we're going to get low coverage for our statements. And then we're not covering our lines very well either. So
Explain what exactly a branch is.
the branch being something like, actually here I can demonstrate. So if we say, if customers, or we'll say if not customers, then we'll just return. So if you're not going to give me any customers, I don't care. And then we'll go rerun that. And if I refresh here, there we go. So now we have this branch, which is not being covered. And so our branches are down to 0%. That make sense? Oh, sweet. So branch being like an if statement, it could also be a ternary operator. So like customers equals customers. Well, this isn't a ternary, but we could do that. Or that. So each one of those would be a branch.
So if you have two ifs followed by each other, would that be?
Two branches, yeah. So if I have if foo, and then even else if bar, that's two branches. And then if I have another if baz, that'd be another branch. That makes sense? Hopefully. Okay, great. So I think that, well, sure. Do you all want me to actually write these tests, or should I just copy and paste them? Like the actual, and then like we can talk through it, but could be valuable to write the tests, to actually like go through the process of writing the tests, if that is something you're interested in doing. So yay or nay on actually writing the tests? Nay. Okay, great. I will just copy them. So if we go to this guy, whoops. We'll go to our app and components, and oh wait, no, we're in store. customers. Wait, no, the test. So I'll just copy this and paste it in here. Okay, so now I'll just go ahead and run the cover thing and let's explain what's going on here. So I just got rid of the test.skip and I have the same test here. So I'm just going to say store get customers and make sure that the customer length is 0. With AVA, I should actually, let's go ahead and I'll show the different APIs for AVA tests. So you might be familiar with Chai or Jasmine's built-in assertion library, or maybe the expect library, assertions. But AVA comes with its own assertions, and it's great to use them because then you get really powerful error messages. Actually, before I go into the different APIs, I'll go ahead and just change this to 1. And we'll run in our watch. And here we can see when it's done. Oh, whoops. And also we're getting a deprecation notice, so I'll fix that later. I'm actually responsible for the deprecation notice. Fun stuff. Those are my words. Okay, so here we see that in the store folder, that's where it's getting the folder or this name here in the customers folder of the store, or the customers file of the store folder. Customers should start with empty. So here the assertion error is false is equal to true. But then if we look at the output of the error, we see something really fancy. And we see normally like this is all that you would get in like a Mocha or like a Chai or a Jasmine test. But with AVA and Power Assert, you actually get some really helpful contextual information. And that is the value of the things that you're asserting. So the value of customers.length is 0, and you're asserting that it's going to be 1. To demonstrate this even further, I could say const expected equals 1. Expected. And with if we get rid of the verbose, in fact, I'll get rid of the verbose just to demonstrate that really quick. The output is a lot more friendly without verbose, even if it doesn't show quite everything. So here now, we see this output, which is super awesome. So it contextually can find out from your code what the values of these different things are and gives you really valuable, helpful information. So maybe I haven't convinced you on why that's so cool, but try it out and you'll see that it is awesome to not have to like add messages. I can still add messages. Customer list length should be 1 or 0, and it will give me that more like specific message somewhere. Yeah, right here. But still, I don't think that's any more valuable than just having the Power Assert stuff. So anyway, that's pretty fancy. So any questions about Power Assert or how that all works? Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and change this deep equal, or actually is, wait, yeah, deep equal. Just because I'm tired of that deprecation message. Great. So we have 3 passing tests. So let's go ahead and look at some of the assertions really quick. So you can do pass, and that just passes a test. This is mostly useful. Well, it's not. I have used it a time or two, but not very often. Fail is more useful. Like if you have a promise or something, like you were to say, let's just pretend this returns a promise then. And let's say that like what you're testing is that this should actually fail. And so here you can say t.fail. And so if the success case gets executed in your promise, then that in your test case is actually a failure, something like that. So that can be useful. I have definitely used that. Then truthy and falsy are doing what you think they are. And then true and false is basically evaluating whether the value is true or false, or like truthy or falsy. Then you have true or false, whether the value is actually true or false. Is meaning this is a triple equal to this, and not this is not triple equal to that. And deep equal will do comparisons like t dot deep equal of bar and foo baz, and then you just have the same kind of structure, foo baz, and that should pass. And so like what's nice about that is even though these aren't exactly the same reference, so this would fail if I did is, they have the same structure, and so this will check all the way down to primitive values whether those have the same structure. So that is handy. Then you have throws. And then you obviously not deep equal, doing the opposite. Then you have throws. So it's actually cool. I didn't realize, but you can do this with a promise, which is kind of handy. But if you have like, let's say that you want to test this throws an error if you pass me a Boolean or something. So you have t.throws, and then you pass it a function that it should call. And so we're going to give it an arrow function, and we want it to call like, well, we could do foo, because this will actually throw because foo is not defined. And this will pass. So when we call foo as a function, that's going to throw an error because a foo is not defined. But this could also be helpful to say not throws. And now we're going to get an error here saying actually it did throw, and what it threw is foo is not defined. That, yeah, we're almost done with assertions. There are actually not a ton of them, and that's actually a feature, not a problem, I guess. So then also regex. So you can say it like needs to match this regex, and then also if error. So yeah, if we had like const foo is a new error, then t dot if error. Whoa, and we get this crazy output because I don't know JavaScript. Oh yeah, const, there we go. There we go. So it actually is an error, and so yeah, that's bad. But if we say null, then this should pass. Sweet. Okay, so that is all of the assertions. You can add a dot skip to stuff if like to do this is weird or something. That can be handy in that scenario. And I think that's it about the assertions. Any questions about AVA assertions? Okay. Sorry? Sorry, could you repeat the question? So like, I'm hearing echoes. So you're saying like, in the context of end-to-end testing, which I think is kind of what you're talking about, like often you need to wait or sleep until a button appears on the page or something, and then you need to click it or something. This isn't that style of testing, but there's definitely great support for asynchronous style testing. Unfortunately, I don't have any like actual examples for you in this workshop, but if I show the different syntax here. So if you're doing like asynchronous type testing, then in this scenario, you can return a promise. So like if you're doing something to do a promise or something, then you can return that. And if that promise resolves, then your test passes. You can also do assertions within like within the context of that promise. You also have generator support. I've yet to actually use generators, so I can't speak much to that. But it is also awesome. Async and await. I also have yet to do much with that, but it has awesome support for that. So that's kind of cool. Yeah. Oh, dang it. Should I just wrap up? Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's it.
Thank you very much for doing the talk. That was really
Yeah. Hopefully, we didn't really get into any React, but you can check out the workshop